Hello and welcome back to this Downfall Atheistic Crusade. This video will be a very brief one going over the three titles I picked up during Criterion's recent flash sale. As always with both the flash sale and the Barnes & Noble sale, it's always very difficult to not just run in and buy everything you don't have yet and everything that you want and all the classic films that you just realize you still don't have yet and you're just like, but I need. So exercising control and then also using my $10 coupon from the Citizen Kane return disc program, I was able to pick up three titles I needed. I do try to always backtrack and pick up titles that I've just been meaning to get or upgrades or things. And personally, I find it most helpful when I focus on just one particular director or star or a particular film genre to chip away at. So that way I can focus on one thing and finish it off and not just buy some sporadic ones and then still be missing other films. So this time, although it did take me quite a while to whittle my list down because, of course, I went through and just started adding all the things to my cart that I don't have yet. I focused on and chipped away at finishing off the John Ford films that Criterion has done on Blu-ray releases. So with these three, I believe that brings me up to date. Of course, I have these films on DVD and some on Laserdisc as well, so it's not my first time around with John Ford masterpieces on disc. So first, I had to pick up the beautiful Blu-ray upgrade to to the Criterion DVD release, so Spine 320, because it is a returning title of Young Mr. Lincoln, the absolutely beautiful picture that Ford made in 1939 in the same year that he made Stagecoach. So as usual, it's amazing to think of how many great films John Ford made and sometimes how many great films that John Ford made in the same year. His artistry and his mastery is just unparalleled, and it still pains me to a great degree that he is not as revered as a name and as thought of by people today as he really should be, as one of the greatest artists in American history, and really the man responsible for writing and rewriting a lot of what people even picture as American in terms of idealism and morality. A lot of that is represented here in Young Mr. Lincoln with the absolutely incredible Henry Fonda performance. This still remains the greatest film about Lincoln, even though it is confined to his earlier days. Even though there have been films that, like Spielberg's Lincoln, that do a pretty decent job, there has never been any film to ever even begin to approach Young Mr. Lincoln. And they did relatively keep the same art as the 2-disc DVD had, but it is refined out into their Blu-ray design, and the actual art has a sort of... I mean, it does still have the trees printed in the background very faintly, but it sort of has a parchment look to it or something. It does have the old-timey flavor to it, and that, along with the font choice, really helps sell that. And, of course, when you unfold the entire case, it looks beautiful. And that carries over to the interior, which everything matches, from the booklet to the inner art to the disc art. And the disc label actually uses the same photo they used on the Laserdisc jacket. But it's got a beautiful booklet, beautiful interior art. This is one of the releases I've just been dying to pick up, one of the many that I just haven't yet, because one can never afford all the discs one wants at any given time. But this is from a brand new 4K digital restoration. It has a new Joseph McBride audio commentary. McBride is one of my all-time favorite film scholars. He is my favorite film biographer, and his book, Searching for John Ford, is, I think, the book on Ford. Scott Emon's Ford book is also great. There are many great books about Ford, but McBride's book, Searching for John Ford, is my favorite one, and just an absolutely incredible book. And I really do love it when he gets to do a commentary, whether it's on Ford or Billy Wilder, or he's done a great number of fantastic commentaries. So I've really been looking forward to this release for that as well, in addition to the restoration. It does carry over the various extras from the DVD. It is a pretty substantial release in terms of the extras package, and I've just been dying to check out the 4K restoration on Blu-ray, so I can't wait to check this out and also dig into the tech specs like I like to do, so I can compare this to the old Criterion DVD and the old Fox Laserdisc as well. Then we move on to Spine 516, the aforementioned masterpiece, also from 1939, Stagecoach. Typically, I think you could call this film, perhaps in a lot of ways, one of, if not the prototypical Western. This really redefined the Western genre, and its major success in 1939 helped to reinvigorate the genre for another 2 decades. And it is Ford achieving a level of artistry with the Western that elevated the entire genre, and this film also forever cemented John Wayne as a cinematic icon, because before this he had really been working in B films and B westerns for most of the decade after the failure of 1930's The Big Trail, which is a very beautiful, highly interesting film directed by Raoul Walsh that unfortunately failed at the box office and really made John Wayne's career take a nosedive. So basically Ford comes around at the end of the decade and is like, all right, let's try this again. Stagecoach, of course, story-wise does borrow or at least work from the original idea from Guy de Maupassant, the idea of the various characters enduring each other's company on a stagecoach ride is essentially the Guy de Maupassant famous short story, but reworked into a Western form in this film, which basically births so many elements of the Western that everybody thinks of when they think of a Western. So if you've never seen Stagecoach, you really are missing out. It is one of the cinematic classic tomes of American myth, and is also justifiably famous for the incredible stunt work of Yakima Canutt, who reprises his infamous stunt of going under the stagecoach, so going to the team of horses and going under them and coming out the back of the stagecoach, which was reprised and lifted for Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Indy does it under the truck with the whip, but Yakima does it in the film for real with an entire stagecoach team, and he's really recreating the same stunt that he originally created that same year for the masterpiece Republic serial Zorro's Fighting Legion, which apparently they decided to rework that amazing stunt from that particular chapter of Zorro's Fighting Legion, which has amazing stunts throughout the entirety of the serial. It's one of the greatest serials ever made. But this famous stunt appears in both these releases from 1939 and was famously reused in Raiders of the Lost Ark. So you get that fun if you're an indie fan and you've not seen Stagecoach before. But this is a beautiful release. I really love what Criterion did with the art. It gives a very, it's got a timeless flavor to it. It feels very much like a classical Western painting that you'd see in a Western art museum. But it has, again, as I like to say, an old-timey type flavor to it that fits perfectly with the film's truly iconic status. The booklet is pretty loaded, and then the interior art has a slightly more modern take to it, but it looks really impressive, where John Wayne's iconic pose is copied and colorized. This is one of the top Criterion discs I've been kicking myself that I haven't gotten yet. The extras package is quite substantial, and it is essentially the product of a new restoration that was done. It wasn't done in 4K, it was just high definition, so I'm guessing 2K. But transfer-wise, it leaps ahead of the Warner Brothers DVD I have here in the Wayne Ford box set. Which was a bit too bright, and unfortunately this disc does have DVD rot like a lot of Warner discs do. So transfer-wise, this is a huge improvement over the DVDs. The final release Laserdisc was pretty good, as was the first DVD that copied it. They did improve the transfer for the DVD, a special edition 2-disc set, but it is a bit bright. So it's nice to see the film beautifully realized in HD with new restoration work applied to it. And of course, the audio is lossless. This does have a great audio commentary, but most impressive for me is that it includes one of the early silent films by John Ford, the 1917 film Bucking Broadway. So this is really essential for Ford fans because you're getting one of his surviving silent films included in the extras package. And Ford's work in the silent era is unbelievably important, and unfortunately only certain films survive. So being able to see any of Ford's silent films outside the most famous being The Iron Horse from 1924, it's just unbelievably important to be able to look at any of Ford's early work and see his development in film artistry, but also see what he was doing in the silent era and how he started differentiating himself from everybody else, not just in silent westerns, but other silent films as well. The extras continue with an actual vintage interview with Ford, and it is loaded with new pieces. Peter Bogdanovich has a piece on here, of course, being one of the most famous Ford fanatics, as you really should be. It does carry over some of the elements from the Stagecoach Special Edition. It brings many new elements of its own. It includes the radio adaptation, so I'm just really excited to dig through this. It doesn't have absolutely everything from the 2-disc Stagecoach Special Edition DVD, so if you want all the extras, you will have to have both, but the extras on the Criterion really vault ahead, particularly most importantly with the inclusion of a classic John Ford silent film as well. And then lastly, Spine 732, the absolutely essential masterpiece Western 1946's My Darling Clementine, with the absolutely beautiful image of Henry Fonda leaning back on the porch. This is one of the most iconic images of any Western for me. It's pretty much burned into my brain. This, like Stagecoach, is one of the essential, 5 or 10 Westerns that define a genre. And when you go back to the well and you see this film, especially for the first time, it's like seeing Stagecoach for the first time or seeing Red River for the first time. It's finally being able to understand such a part of the American mythology. And this is an absolutely loaded release, also because it's not just a 4K restoration, but it includes multiple versions of the film. So it includes the pre-release version, which runs 103 minutes, and then also the standard 97-minute version. This being a Fox film, there is always a great degree of fine-tuning and editing that was done by Daryl Zanuck, who of course ran the studio. So it is common for there to have been different edits and versions of films at Fox in the classic era of the studio system, because you'd have a pre-release version, you'd have maybe, the preferred director's cut, and then you'd have the final release version that was done by Zanuck, who would make changes to John Ford's films, but he did have a good sense of story and what audiences would accept. And so even if Ford would bitterly complain about cuts that Zanuck would make, he at least would understand what Zanuck was up to and what he was doing. But it's really important and amazing that both versions survive for My Darling Clementine, so you can actually examine them for yourself. So in that way, it's very much like what you get on the beautiful Essential Criterion release of Red River, where you get the theatrical release version and the pre-release version as well. The interior art continues the theme of really getting into the town and just enveloping yourself inside the universe that this film so richly creates. So you very much get the texture of the film in the art design. So while it is very straightforward, it's not a super fancy release, you get the texture of the film, which is very important in any art design, and it's something that Criterion almost always excels at. The extras package is quite loaded. Again, it's a brand new 4K digital restoration of the film, and you're also getting the presentation of the 103-minute pre-release version. So it appears the 4K restoration was for the theatrical cut, and then the pre-release version is a HD presentation. I'm not sure if they did 4K work on both versions, but the actual lettering of the extras seems to indicate the 4K work was on the theatrical cut. Once again, there is a new commentary by Joseph McBride, another reason why I've been dying to get this release. There's new interviews about the historical context of the real Wyatt Earp. There's a beautiful comparison piece of the two versions by the legendary Robert Gitt, which is worth the price of admission alone. We get more loads of extras, including radio adaptations. So it is just an incredible package. But again, I think most important is the inclusion of a silent feature, just the 1916 film Bandit's Wager, which is actually directed by Ford's brother Francis Ford, who was actually the more famous, more notable silent film director. And it's got John Ford in an acting role because Ford basically started essentially under his brother and eventually wound up usurping his brother, and then his brother turns up as an actor doing some character and bit parts in Ford films, and his career as a silent film director essentially fizzles out in the sound era, and he becomes an actor instead. So you essentially have the inversion of the two brothers' positions. But Francis Ford was a very great silent film director and made some great silent westerns. So it's amazing to get a silent film directed by Francis Ford, starring John Ford in an acting role, as you get to see Ford himself on screen, because he did do a substantial number of acting parts. It's amazing that one of these has survived and has been included in the extras package. So I can't wait to dig through this. Again, I've been meaning to get all three of these for so long. I've been kicking myself I haven't done it yet as a Ford fan. It's just 3 more Criterion titles that I have just been needing and just lamenting and kicking myself I hadn't gotten yet. So I was finally able to chip these off my wish list in the Criterion sale. So as always, if you have any comments about these particular Criterion releases and how they have treated some of John Ford's films on Blu-ray, or you want to talk about maybe what you picked up in the Criterion flash sale, please leave any comments below. I always love hearing from you guys. And as I like to say to close out all these videos, keep supporting your boutique Blu-ray labels, keep supporting your studio Blu-ray labels as well. Keep your disc spinning to help physical media stay alive. Thanks ever so much for watching.